This is Senate Appropriations, and we're continuing our testimony on the FY 2023 budget adjustment, and we're taking testimony now from the Department of Corrections, and we have Commissioner Gemmell here and staffs. If you want to introduce your staff as well as putting yourself on record, we will work from this document, I believe. That's what you would like. Okay.
Great, thank you for having us. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nick Gemmell. I'm the Commissioner of the Vermont Department of Corrections. I feel like I'm a little kid that's here with this short chair, so forgive me if I have complex as we go on. I will let Kristen introduce herself and Isaac.
Thank you. Kristen Calvert, Financial Director for Department of Corrections.
I'm Isaac Dino, I'm the Policy Director.
Okay, is that a new position?
It is. The full title is Executive Director of Policy and Strategic Initiatives, which Chair Emmons this morning informed me was taller than I am. In a fun way. It was in a spirit.
Okay, well, I'm glad you took it in that light.
Just one of those differences between the House and Senate, I guess.
And the commissioner and I, last time we met, was in jail.
That's right. Yeah. Like most of our encounters.
I would
No,
prefer not to remain here. That's what the hired man said.
but a lovely event.
It was a very lovely event, and I have to commend the four guys who had completed their high school education and got a high school diploma from the Community High School of Vermont, which we know that the governor is going to propose to put into the funding center. Sears, I just thought I'd point that out.
But there is a new person at the end of the process, so I don't know. In other words, House Waste Needs.
Yeah.
So maybe it goes through.
I don't know. It just seems like they should have access to that entitlement the same as any other Vermonter. But we have not been successful, but maybe this is the year. So
Should be the year.
So do you want to work from this document? Is that your plan?
Yes.
All right. And are you speaking on behalf, or is the commissioner doing this?
Yeah, I'll
You're
present
gonna
the
fill it in.
technical piece, sure, and then if there's any more substantive questions, I can.
We won't hesitate to ask.
I'm glad. So the last 3 pages are the ups and downs, which I believe you received previously. We have no changes in the Corrections Administration, Parole Board, or Education appropriations. Most of our changes are in the correctional services. The first 4 downs that you'll see are a technical adjustment to move those funds into the new justice reinvestment appropriation.
Okay.
So that's a net.
Something near and dear to our hearts, huh? Senator Sears? Yeah.
Correct. So no changes there, just again, a technical adjustment. The next one down is 6.8 million for our Stability and Sustainability Plan. This was a side letter agreement with the union that we established that provides recruitment and retention bonuses, hourly shift bonuses.
Is that why we have Mr. Howard joining us, do you suppose?
He's going in for that illusion.
Right.
I know. All right, so that's 6.8 million.
But it's 6.8, and the 2 downs below that was an exercise we did to find savings that would hopefully result from the stability and sustainability plan, excuse me.
And that actually materialized.
We're hoping they will by the end of the agreement. Yes, and based on current vacancy savings. The next down is, or up rather, is funds that are AHS net neutral from unspent one-time appropriations from other AHS departments. Same with the 675,000, and those will go towards DOC's pay act request. The next one is an AHS net neutral, which is a move of position from DOC into the AHS central office.
Oh, and what is it carried forward from general assistance to DOC?
I am not familiar with that program specifically. It's a DCF program, or was,
I know.
but we can get you information.
I'm very familiar with it.
Okay.
My question is, what's happening here?
My understanding that it was unspent funds
Okay, so just a reallocation within the agency?
So, yeah, it's unspent funds at the end of 22 or within the current forecast for 23.
I would think that pressure on GA would be fairly substantial. For those who'd like a history lesson, the GA program is the program that came to the state back in the late 60s, and it replaced the overseer of the poor system. So it is emergency empty pockets program that was made statewide simply because some of the poorest towns were the ones that had the highest need. And so it was a way of helping to equalize that burden. And then, of course, you had a provision that if you had lived in a town for 3 years, you were unsettled and it would fall to the state. So there was a great incentive never to make sure a family got settled. That way your town wouldn't be on the hook for those services. So that's why I'm just wondering what's happening here. I guess this is probably internal to the agency where you're taking money that wasn't spent in a program and reallocating it. That's kind of an interesting source of reallocation. I gather,
I'm gonna go look at DCF just to see if it's.
yeah, we're gonna check on that.
Sure.
Okay.
Do you want me to continue on?
Yeah, why don't we? So it's just kind of an interesting.
It's within the current fiscal year. It's not related, it doesn't say it's related to the carry forward. Oh,
It
is
does.
like carry forward,
It does say carry
but it
forward.
doesn't say what is being said, why GA had to carry forward.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, I know that's getting outside your wheelhouse.
Sure,
I hate
but-
that term. But because it does involve a program in a different department. It's just kind of interesting. Health services
Health
contract.
services contract, correct. This reflects FY 22 and or anticipated FY 23 overages in offsite and pharmaceutical costs with our current healthcare contract vendor.
Current, are you doing a new contract?
We finished an RFP and we're in negotiation processes currently.
But this doesn't reflect any of that.
It does not.
Because it would be a much bigger figure. That's what I've been advised.
Yes.
So the pharmaceutical contract that you're talking about is for all pharmaceuticals, or is it specific to MAT or in transition, or?
My understanding is it's inclusive of all pharmaceutical costs that the
That the
contract
inmates
covers.
are needing.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Next over in our federals column there is spending authority for our Prison Rape Elimination Act grant that we received through BJA. This represents the FY 23 expenditures that we plan to have. The total
And
grant,
that's a multi-year grant then? This is.
Yes, it
year
is.
one?
yeah, so this is this current year, and then we'll have a small amount for the next year.
How's that money spent besides signs in the correctional facilities?
They're using it to establish a broader range of training protocol for not only DOC staff, but other stakeholders that relate to PREA. So it could be judiciary staff, community partners, and then just quarterly meetings.
Is there any kind of programming for particularly more vulnerable populations who are incarcerated?
Not that I'm aware of
Like
that.
child sex offenders, for example, or.
Yeah,
very
or
vulnerable,
people who are, you know,
LGBT.
maybe vulnerable to attack because of their size or whatever.
Right, I don't believe that grant covers that scope.
I just would love to understand how we use that money, and I know that, you know, one of the discussions we've had is about particularly younger people being incarcerated and how they can be taken advantage of by older offenders.
Right.
And I've noted there's been, you know, several incidents that have been reported lately of inmate on inmate attacks.
Oh, that
So,
the older gentleman
yeah.
in St. Albans and the younger.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's anything to do with that, but. if
Does
this
that
money can be
influence
used-
how, and maybe your space considerations don't allow it, but what you use for prisoner characteristics in terms of, you have cells that are shared, right? So are you cautious about that prisoner mix.
Yeah, we try
To
to
the
be,
extent you can.
right, so as you all are well aware, we have a unified system, meaning we have detainees, folks who are pre-sentenced, and then we have the sentenced population. But due to the space limitations, the size of our system, those populations are mixed for the most part. So we do have a variety of different tools we use to assess risk and try to pair people up using those scores. We also record people who are particularly vulnerable or people who are perpetrators of violence, and that's included in their file so that we can make sure that we're not putting, perpetrators of violence with people who are vulnerable, that type of thing. And so there is a lot of that work goes into housing assignments. It's not a perfect science, as you can imagine, but I think in general, we do pretty well with that. The violence rate in the Vermont prison system is very low, especially when we compare it to national standards. But to the senator's question, I think if you're interested, either here or in the Senate Judiciary, we could bring in our PREA expert and have her brief on PREA.
I'd like to actually delve into it a little further. At one point, we had, I think the Senate passed it. I don't think the House was agreeable to it, but we had tried to suggest that we separate offenders under the age of 25 in separate facilities from those over 25. And I think it's worth taking a look at again. And I don't want to belabor the point here, but I would love to have more conversations about that, why it might make sense in our smaller correctional facilities. I know it was a pain in the neck to send people 22 to Newport from Bennington, and I did hear from some parents about that, but it makes sense to have them, there's a different. Anyway,
be happy to talk more.
I have one other question.
Yes.
On going back to the justice reinvestment, when we're using the numbers, is it the out-of-state contract or is it the numbers that the commissioner gave us in Senate Judiciary the other day? Which was much higher than the contract. It was the actual cost. It was 95,000 to house an offender in Vermont, 47,000 out. Are we using that number or are we using the contract number to determine the JR2?
The contract amount. Yeah,
So maybe
The budgeted amount.
we would like to I'd like to have a discussion about using the real numbers.
Didn't we get, I was trying to think of a document on that. Didn't we get one?
Well, we
last
might have
week?
gotten it in here, but we
I think
had
so.
the commissioner in the Senate Judiciary last
By
week.
real numbers, you mean when they were figuring in
How they
the
determine.
cost, like the prorated cost of the system?
Yeah.
The total cost of the contract versus the amount that the state budgets
Yeah.
for is different. And it's that delta, I think, that you wanted to talk about.
Because that determines, that's how we define the savings to
Yeah.
be reinvested.
Right.
It seems like we got something here.
We probably did here too, but why do I remember the one from Judiciary better than the one from here?
I don't know.
Well, we gave you that briefing last week, and I don't think we met with appropriations yet this year, so it could just be a feature of time.
That could be.
I do have this from your legislative oversight.
Yeah, that was
That's a different one.
that's a document. It's just that what figure do we use to determine what is the savings?
Yeah, and therefore what's available to reinvest.
And maybe we should just use the contract. We could argue either way.
Yeah, so just to state fact, right now, we are using the budgeted amount and the savings out of what is budgeted for and what is actually spent.
Yeah.
Which is lower than the total cost of the contract.
And then I do have a question about the shift bonuses.
So you're back up to the 6.8?
Yeah.
Okay.
At what point do we get I've asked you this question before, I think, so if you want to come back and talk to me later, if it takes you I don't want to take you by surprise. At what point do we get our field offices back to, I'm going to use the term normal, it's never normal there, but at least so that our vendors in the communities are being supervised appropriately. And we're not asking people from the field staff to cover shifts at the correctional facilities.
Yeah, so we've stopped field staff from covering shifts at correctional facilities unless they're volunteering. So that part is ended. What the big complaint that we hear from field staff now is they're on hospital standby coverage. So an incarcerated individual goes to a hospital, the field is helping us to supervise that individual while they're in the hospital. And really, it isn't even when they have to go to the hospital, but we are maintaining a standby list across the state, multiple lists across the state. And when a field, so a probation officer from Bennington is on standby, it means they have to be able to respond within an hour, curtails what activities they can do. Obviously, you can't consume alcohol, things like that, because if you get called in, you need to be able to perform your duties. And so we have a lot of folks who are on standby for many hours. Even if they don't get called in, it limits what they can do with their free time. So we released the first half of a plan to address that. We're hoping to release the second half of that plan towards the end of the month or early February. And we assembled a team of line staff, supervisors, district managers, people from the facilities to help study the different problems. And we pulled down all the data that looks at what's our total exposure to standby, how many hours are people being exposed to having to be on standby, how do we bring that down, shorten those windows, either limit the number of hours to really be available only when it's absolutely necessary, not to just always be on standby. And I think we're close to finalizing that plan and releasing it. But the reality is when you bring in the staffing data, it will be a while before our facilities are able to take all of those duties back. So knowing that, what can we do in this period between when we get to that point and today to make sure that the field isn't being exposed to as much overtime or standby hours? So hopefully we'll have that plan ready to present. As soon as we do, I'll be happy to share a copy with you. And certainly we share that with our
I
staff.
will comment that standby sometimes more difficult than actually doing the job.
And that's what the field staff has said to us. And so we heard that, and we've been working to try to figure out how we meet our mission objectives, but also balance that with the staff. And that was much harder than I expected it to be. Fixing the facility side was almost easier in retrospect than trying to figure out how we balance this with the field. So like I said, hopefully within the next couple of weeks, we'll have the plan finalized and released, and we have to share that.
Senator Starr.
Yeah, I'm wondering, how much do they get paid for standby?
Under the contract, they have a formula for that.
Right.
Yeah, and this $6.8 million side letter agreement included an additional amount of money on top of the contract negotiated rate in recognition of this is the burden that we're putting on you. And it raised it, I think, $1.50 an hour over what the contract rate was. And we can provide all those figures for you so you can see.
You don't know what it is?
Well, it's based on the individual salary, and the salaries vary.
Well, the only thing is I've heard that some of the employees are making, 6-digit numbers.
Oh, they are, with the overtime, they are, because we've had to do mandatory overtime because of staffing. So they're coming in at, what do you have to pay, time and a half? Yeah.
Double.
So if you're having people that are there and they're coming in maybe even more than maybe 6 days a week, some might have to.
Sure.
So you're gonna add that up pretty fast. So I'm not surprised to hear that.
But I mean, if it's costing us too much, it might be cheaper to move them to an out-of-state place. I mean, that's,
Well,
the
That
overall
raises a
cost.
huge policy issue.
I'm trying to go the reverse.
you remember the
Well,
accolade?
I like to eat out all the time, but if the budget goes to pot, I have to eat at home, sometimes you can't
Can
always
you
have
send a
what you
recording of
want.
this?
I'm not, I hear what Senator Starr is and what you're, and I don't want to move anybody out of state to do this. But the people that I know that are working in they're mostly around, for me, around St. Albans.
Sure.
The length of time that they're expected to work is now not, it's like 12 hours and plus a day. The amount of overtime that the people are working is astronomical. And the burnout rate for these people is right on the edge. So the question really to me is, do we wanna, I don't think your staff can keep it up from the people that I know. The people that I know are on the verge and they're saying, we work and we're making lots of money, but we can't do this much longer.
Yeah.
So I'm worried from that point of view, what will we be forced into?
Well, you'll have to go up to the St. Albans facility and help out.
Yeah, get a job.
I'm not sure I want to go up now, but I do have to tell you that I hear this all the time now.
We do, people, and that's really what Senator Sears is, and they've tried to address it by pulling in the whole probation and parole vote.
Yeah.
And it's a situation that is not sustainable because people are tired and if they have a commute on top of it, and you said some didn't even commute home, they'd sleep in their cars.
Yeah.
And so when you hear that, and then no, on the other hand, it's a very difficult job. I know you're trying to recruit, and so you don't have you have a lot of just Sophie's choices out there.
It's
Right.
terrible.
Well, Senator, your point's very well taken. You're absolutely right. I was at Northwest last week and walked around and talked to staff in the living units, and the message I heard was, we're hanging in there, but we're just hanging in, you know? Unfortunately, St. Albans, we have 6 facilities in the state. St. Albans is one of 2 that is still on our 12-hour shifts that are 60-hour work weeks. The other 4 facilities have moved to the 50-50
Well,
schedule.
and that's 12 and 60 hours, and then they're doing overtime on top of that.
What is the?
Yeah, in some cases,
Yes.
that's right.
It's 60 hours a week, and it's 12 hours a day, and it's not an easy job, and then they're doing overtime on top of that. So I don't know how long these people can last.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that could be helpful is if we brought in our presentation on the plan that we rolled out, and we can show you how it's moved the system since the summer. So we had a 30% vacancy rate in our security staff this summer. We are down to 25%. That's not great, but it's better. So 5% in 5 months is about how much impact we've had. We hope to drive that number down further. If we could get down to a 15% range, I think that we'd be in a much different place. Of course, we want 0. We want to be turning people away, but it'll take us a long time to get there. What we've done appears to be working. I don't want to oversell it, but the trend lines are all moving in the right direction.
And then we made some changes on the retirement benefit, which was big.
Yeah, there was the Group G, I think it's called, the
Right.
new.
We created a-
system.
in recognition of the nature of the workload that this group of employees have. So that's not going to be experienced short term. But there's some variability, and it sounds like Franklin, St. Albans is really under the most acute stress at this
And
point.
Newport would be another place at point 2. Those are the 2 facilities. who
St.
have not
J
moved
said that they
over
were
this.
feeling pretty good
Yeah.
the day they were down there. So.
And Martin Valley, Chittenden, Springfield, all
So
coming.
those are the 2 that are really under great stress.
Yeah,
So
So it's kind of like and then
you said the vacancy rate is around 20%?
25% for
25%.
security staff.
And just since I'm new to this, what kind of numbers is that? How many
Raw
positions?
numbers?
Yeah.
If we were fully staffed, I think we'd be near 1,000. So,
Couple hundred.
Couple hundred off still, yeah. 180 maybe, somewhere in that neighborhood. We get you the true raw numbers. but-
when you're working 24/7 facility, it takes a lot of staff.
Yeah, and truly, it's not as simple as we can raise the salary $5 an hour, or we can lower the salary and do something else. I mean, the number of variables we're having to control for when we try to solve these problems is enormous.
So one more, and then we'll.
Just follow up on the staffing, is part of that plan to, I know the side letter that you have is ending, is that part of the plan to get a new agreement with the staff, or where is?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we'll have to approach that again. I think it ends in the end of March, somewhere in that timeframe. So we'll discuss with BSA where we go from here. But I suspect that it will be on the table.
Does the big bill for 24 reflect that?
Does it reflect a new side letter? I don't believe so.
Senator Starr.
Well, I was just gonna add to the, talking about how, they're working 12 hours a day. We have people that are looking after our loved ones in the hospital, nurses that work 12-hour shifts constantly. We have pilots that work 12-hour shifts. I don't know how hard the employee's work is physically.
It's quite hard.
But we have a lot of people that work 12-hour shifts.
Yeah, the question is how many days in a week though? Because a lot of those in hospitals, they
3
days, yeah.
Right.
3
So
1 week before the next, but it's still, I mean, they're keeping people alive and they've got to be on their toes constantly, and so, I mean, I never knew a day that wasn't 12 hours that I worked, and
Well, I think it's not just the 12 hours, which is bad, or the cumulative for the week. It's the fact that you're working in a facility with bars, with a prison population. The tensions there are astounding, just walking in to visit. And I can't help but think of those surveys that came out of the inmates and the people who work there, and how often suicidal ideation comes into play. So I take the point, lots of people work hard, but nobody other than the corrections officers and the staff in a prison work in a prison, which is unique.
And when that door closes behind you, it creates a whole different environment.
there's a study from a few years ago where they looked at the California prison staff and found that the rates of suicide contemplation astronomically high. They found that the trauma experienced by correction staff was similar to that experienced by military combat veterans. The suicide rates higher than law enforcement across the country. Really bad health outcomes. The life expectancy for corrections officers much shorter than it is for an average American male. It is, to be clear, a very challenging job, mentally, emotionally, physically, and we need to support these folks, and that's what our department is trying to do, is really wrap around them their whole life and find ways to support them in every facet.
So Rachel, another question, comment?
So, what you're talking about, this is just you're talking 60 hours a week and then going into overtime.
But that's only at 2 of our facilities.
Yeah, I understand that, but I'm telling you what where I'm hearing the most, I know 3 people that are working there and doing it. How everybody else can't hire anybody. How are you able to hire people under these kind of conditions?
Yeah, so we have completely retooled our approach to hiring in the last year, and we're seeing really, really positive results. We just ran and graduated our largest academy in our history that anybody that's working in EOC today can remember. We graduated more than 50 new recruits in one academy class. Our average is about 20. A 20-person academy class is a big class for us, and we just graduated 50 in one class. We've dropped our recruitment rate, our vacancy rate by 5% in 5 months. That's a big deal in this environment. When you think the state is at 2.3 to 2.5 unemployment rate, we've got 40,000 available jobs with only 10,000 people looking. So any one person looking for a job can choose from 4 options. The way we did that is really dedicate a resource in each of our 6 facilities that their only job is recruitment. And then we changed the way that we approach the recruits that we're trying to get. We made it very personal. We made personal connections with them, phone calls, texts at all hours. When they wanted to apply, we would be right there, whatever time of day it was, to help them work through the process and to be charitable to our friends in DHR. It's not always the easiest process to apply for a state job. It can be a bit complicated. So we help them work through that process. But that personal connection, I think, has really made a difference. And then we try to explain the change in the department. So going to 12-hour shifts are tough, I get it. But at the other 4 facilities, they're working 7 of 14 days in a pay period. Meaning, if you took a calendar for the year and ripped it in half those days are your days at work and half those days are your days off. And we did that because one of the things we heard from staff is everybody wants more money, but everybody in this room would want more money if they were asked. But what staff really said was the biggest problem was they're spending too much time at work. They didn't have time to see their families. They didn't have time to do their hobbies. They had no time to recoup, regenerate from the shift. And so we designed a schedule that would give them the maximum amount of time away from the facilities. Also, if you're on a 12-hour shift model versus an 8-hour shift model, you can use fewer total staff to run a facility in a 24-hour period than if you had 3 8-hour shifts. So it was good for staff, it was good for the system. We put those things together and designed it. We know today we're only recruiting 2 generations, millennials and Gen Z. It's very rare that we get a 50-year-old new recruit who wants to become a corrections officer. So, but we weren't using tactics that appeal to those generations. We were using tactics from 30 years ago and it wasn't working, and not a big surprise there. And so we really tried to retool. I mean, I'm a lifelong public servant. I love the pension. I mean, that's part of the reason you go into government service, but that doesn't appeal to everybody. And particularly for younger generations, what the data would suggest is that pay, pensions, benefits aren't that appealing to, they will be at some point, but they're not when we're hiring them. So what other things can we deliver to them right off the bat? They want mission. These generations are highly interested in working for a cause they believe in. We've got a great mission. That's an easy sell for us. We're helping people to rehabilitate, move into our communities to be successful. They want access to diverse careers. I mean, the department's huge. You can do all sorts of stuff, from being in a living unit to being the commissioner, being a PO, doing, you know, all kinds of data work. We can offer that kind of career diversity. And they want time away. They don't want to be at work 100 hours a week. You know, they want that time of work for home, for friends, for whatever. And so we're trying to deliver on those pieces for them. And that message seems to be working. But I think all of that taken together, it's no one thing that's moving the needle.
One of the things I would think would apply as well, and that is work environments are so determined by the culture and the leadership of the facility. The same is true in schools. The principal really sets that tone. And that's, workers can either be in in a very toxic kind of work environment, or they can be in one that is much more supportive. And the job can be really difficult, but there's a lot of positive attributes about that. And you've had some difficulties with your superintendent. I mean, that's no secret. It's been in the paper. And that really also extracts a toll on staff as well, depending on the nature of the, the situation. And so as you're trying to do this and recruit, how are you sort of tackling some of that legacy culture, or people that are not really perhaps that management position isn't the right fit for them? And how do you train? Because sometimes we promote based on experience and people get into job situations that really aren't the right fit for them. And so once you hire them and once you do all the things that you're talking about, then making sure you keep them. And the other thing that becomes very hard, and in California they did a study many years ago, and people with the most altruistic and most liberal, you put them into that correctional environment after a period of time, it extracts its toll in terms of how they respond, how they think, attitude, and so forth. So that's an ongoing challenge.
Yeah, culture is a huge part of the equation, and that's the most difficult thing to, I think, grapple with. One of the ways we've done that is we've mapped our whole system, really identified what are the key positions of influence around the system. First line supervisors are, I think, arguably the most important position in our system. That is a make or break position. All of our frontline staff report to a first line supervisor. That's the person that a new recruit who comes in the system is going to be interacting with. So we're rolling out training right now to really redesign how we train first line supervisors to provide a lot of that, the type of stuff that you were just describing. I think the other thing that the department had been lacking in and still is lacking in is really professional development work. We're just not particularly good at that. We're good at training core skills, the skills of being a corrections officer, the skills of being a probation officer. We're not great at professional development. And I think that's where we win on a lot of those culture issues is if we can train it early and build it into our system, build it into the fabric of the department, it will help us to avoid them in the first place. And then, we need to improve processes in the department. That's a long-term project of mine is to help streamline, clean up, make transparent and processes that people can believe in, because that's something we've heard from staff, but then also taking allegations of misconduct very seriously and dealing with it and not sweeping it under the rug and not pretending it's not happening, but taking it head on and saying, enough. We are a department of integrity and we're going to hold people accountable who do things that breach that integrity. And I think, again, it's a full suite of things to help move culture. And that'll take some time, but I think we're making the right investments there.
I'm going to suggest we keep going through the budget adjustment. Then we can, obviously, this is a longer conversation. And we'll be having more when you come in for your big bill presentation.
Great.
Sorry, Kristen.
That's okay. The next one is the ADS service level agreement.
Oh, yeah, don't worry about that.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's familiar.
No, we only want the big thing.
Right. So next in the justice reinvestment section, that just reflects the down from correctional services and then the out-of-state 6,000 appropriation, just moving those into justice reinvestment. And that's it.
That's it. I have an interesting corrections related history event. Years ago, there was a riot at the Windsor prison. Remember that, Nick?
No, I don't.
Oh, it was back when Dean Davis was governor.
No.
And Dean Davis
And
and,
long-term memory.
well, I'm glad I still got it. Ken Stoneman was commissioner at the time, but he was out of state. So Con Hogan was the deputy. brought
Yes,
up
now I remember it.
from New Jersey. And so Con went down to the prison and Governor Davis called him and said, "Do you know what you're doing?" And Con said, "Yes, sir, I believe I do." And at that point, the governor said, "Well, good, because I'm going to bed." So, well, so that's ancient history.
Yeah, actually, Con was on our board at that time. And when he just moved up, when he was in New Jersey, he was on the board of the program that I was operating. So I got to know him pretty well in that role, and then he got hired on.
Yeah, but I thought that was an interesting response from the governor. You're hired to do the job,
Yeah.
tell me you can do it.
Right. Well, I thought that was good. At least the governor didn't go down there and try to take over when we didn't know
Well,
it.
that sounds like Con Hogan, though, that he would tell the governor, I got it under control.
Well, I guess they must have at some point.
Yeah.
Well, they also have to remember they had a problem at Wheat School. Remember the students, when they threw the chair and TV and so forth, but those would be very old days.
Windsor was an interesting place.
Yeah.
And I'm amazed there weren't more escapes. I mean, the facility
then, of course,
itself,
you
I
have-
think you could pull the bars and they'd come out.
And then you had the farm.
Oh, yeah.
farm, yeah. Because we had a hired man who ended up down there occasionally, and he said, well, I didn't go to the castle, I went to the farm.
Yeah.
Like, that's right.
Well, they used to have murderers at the farm because they figured they weren't really dangerous anymore.
They're good work.
So that's some old correctional history. I'll bet you hadn't heard that.
I have not heard that one, and I've heard some doozies, so that's a new one.
Oh, yeah. Yes,
One
Senator.
more question on the pay is a big thing. I know in the state government, you can do market adjustments. Is that something that?
Yeah,
is being done?
so as part of the agreement with BSCA and the side letter, the state agreed to do a market factor analysis to inform any adjustments that need to be made. That process is conducted by DHR, and I know they have it underway. Not sure where in the process they are at the moment, but we prioritize.
Reclassification request before.
But it's different than reclassification.
Well, yeah, that's true, but it does,
You can do both.
you can do both, and reclassification is, but you can do market factor adjustment, yeah. I don't know if you do it for an entire class, I guess you could.
I think they do it for like IT folks, them trying to
Yeah.
hire some of those.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
But this is a big class.
Yeah, certainly. And the request that we made at DHR is pretty expansive, so it's a lot of different classes that we're looking at.
So that could play.
Where is the academy?
The academy is up by St. Johnsbury. And I think, of all I think there's a lot of things the department are doing right. The academy curriculum and the training that's provided, I think is some of the best in the country. I think that we have really leaned in hard on the curriculum. And I've been really impressed, and we've had a lot of help from outside to design some of that, from the Justice Department, from our consulting group, the Moss Group, and they do just a really phenomenal job. We actually just expanded the academy by a week, so it's now 6 weeks long. That enabled them to provide a lot more modules in that additional week. And, yeah, pretty excited about that.
Other questions? Appreciate your coming in, and we'll see you again.
Thank you very much.
Back with your bigger request. And so we have finished testimony